Assalomu alaykum aziz muxlislar, tayanch nuqtasining aziz muxlislari. Mana yurtimizda so'nggi olib boriladigan oliy ta'limdagi agar tendensiyalarga va trendlarga qaraydigan bo'lsak, yillar bosqichida, yillar kesimida ko'plab ingliz tilidagi, masalan, o'sha ingliz tilidagi o'quv rejalarining soni oshib bormoqda va ingliz tiliga va xorijiy tillarga bo'lgan e'tibor ham oshib bormoqda. Shuning uchun biz qaror qildikki, tayanch nuqtasini imkon qadar oyda 1 marta yoki oyda 2 marta ingliz tilidagi sonini ham boshlashga qaror qildik. Ya'ni kelajakdagi sonlarimizda, efirlarimizda imkon qadar yurtimizda xizmat ko'rsatayotgan o'sha ilg'or universitetlardagi professorlarni, o'qituvchilarni, trener, spikerlarni taklif etish niyatimiz bor. Demak, bizni maqsadimiz dunyoda bo'lib o'tadigan, ya'ni ta'lim tizimida bo'lib o'tadigan ilg'or tendensiyalar haqida ingliz tilida imkon qadar prezentatsiyalarni tayyorlab sizlarga taqdim etish. Bugungi mavzuyimiz 21-asrdagi ta'lim tizimidagi strategiyalarni biz qanday joriy etishimiz kerak. Ya'ni hozirgi bo'lib o'tadigan, bo'layotgan jarayonlarda qaysi metodologiyani ishlatishimiz kerak. Qay biri juda ham talabalarni dars o'rganishida, o'sha masalan ko'zlangan kontentni o'rganishidagi salohiyati, kuchini, qobiliyatini rivojlantirishda qaysi metodologiya juda ham effektiv hisoblanadi. Shuni biz bugun birgalikda ko'rib chiqamiz va imkon qadar buni ingliz tilida tushuntirishga harakat qilaman. So, it's a great pleasure again to be here with you, and it's my honor to present the first program that we are running for the last 6 months, and the first program will be in English. And today's topic is 21st century language learning and teaching, implementation of intercultural education. So, let's see the sequence of topics. So, a short story about language learning, a brief history of teaching English as a foreign second language, terminologies, language teaching approaches, and teaching English as a foreign, a second language in the 21st century. So, most of you know that. If you remember, if I will ask you a question, could you explain the first time you learned your first foreign language? What was the language acquisition? What was the approach? What was the methods? It will be very difficult for you to remember your elementary school first grade or second grade or third grade, the time when you started your acquisition of foreign language. So that's why usually it may create a type of a difficulty for you to remember. If I will ask you a question like, can you explain me the first lesson you encountered in learning and acquiring a foreign language? So this is the question usually people are asking each other about the first foreign language. So, the language methodology is always interconnected with and we call it interdisciplinary. So we always need a linguistics. So it means that you need to know and you need to understand about the linguistics, about psychology, about applied linguistics, and the aim of instruction, right? So the linguistic, the nature of language in general, and also the English language and the languages of the learning in particular. And psychology, so usually what's happening in the brain, this is very important. So the psychological behavior of the learner and the time when he's or she's learning a language and what she feels or he feels, this is very important, the psychological process. And usually the traditional education didn't include the psychology or didn't focus on psychology too much. And applied linguistics. So most of the recent studies or most of the scholars worldwide, they are very focusing on applied linguistics. As we know, there are different types of linguistics. We have a pure linguistics, mostly semantics, syntax, phonology, etc. And a very less number of scholars are very interested for pure linguistics, or we call it theoretical linguistics. And also the second type of linguistics, we call it second category, we call it descriptive linguistics. It's mostly, we call it comparative linguistics. It's a translation studies, etc. And we have applied linguistics, which is a worldwide phenomena and widely used in most of the universities in the world. So the applied linguistics, it investigates and offers solutions to language-related real-life problems. So we can include EFL, TOEFL, for example, language education, and the other type of applied linguistics. And the instruction, what things must the learner be able to do or with English. So usually we have a task while teaching a foreign language. So what the learner should learn, for what purpose, so we call it needs analysis. So if he's going to be a pilot or economist or like a businessman, etc. So the limited terminologies and the tenses will be selected to teach the language which really fits the content of the learner. Right, so we have different terminologies which is used for the applied linguistics. So the teaching English as a foreign language, it's called TOEFL. Teaching English as a second language, TESOL. Teaching English as additional language in Canada, because in Canada we have different languages, also the languages of indigenous people. So that's why the classification of English language, it's different in Canada. They call it additional language. Teaching English to speakers of other languages, so we call it TESOL. And teaching English to non-English speakers. So these are the terminologies that you will encounter while listening my presentation, while watching my presentation. So there are definitions of the terminologies. No need to give a proper explanation, while you can actually read from the screen. TESOL, TOEFL, and TEAL. So TEAL, we have teachers teaching of English as an additional language in Canada. So, and also we have a TESOL, which is now we have different conferences related with the TESOL. We have a TESOL Arabia, TESOL Canada. I know most of my colleagues, they are joining different TESOL events worldwide. And I hope that they will get a lot of information and a very good experience while coming back and implementing all these methodologies they will have while traveling to all these amazing events. Hopefully, Uzbekistan will also host a grandiose TESOL event in the nearest future. Right. So, like in Uzbekistan, or in other countries, the government puts forward the agenda or the criteria or expectations why a normal citizen, a regular citizen, should learn a foreign language. So this is like an impact on the economy, developing the GDP, and also introducing the country, increasing the visibility of the country. And also it's a literacy. I mean, literacy, which means that you can easily communicate and you can contact your counterpart in different countries, which is again an important focus for the country's economic prosperity when people really speak different foreign languages, like in Scandinavian countries, for example. So like in US and Canada, so they have their own aims. Why to teach English? So to give a children a mastery sufficient to enable them to obtain a complete education in schools. Because, you know, we have in US and Canada, there is a mass immigration from different countries of the globe to those two countries, coming with different background and linguistic background, linguistic competence, and sometimes it's not sufficient or their language aptitude is not sufficient to follow up their peers or classmates. So that's why the US and Canada, they have these aims that to make possible for adult immigrants to function effectively in a new society. And also the foreign students coming or transferring, or exchange students coming from other universities, they need to cope, or which means that they need to master the same level of English, so to understand, to comprehend the content of the textbook or the lectures, and also the presentation of the professors in those two countries. And plus those two countries, like JFK Airport in New York, it's #1 by the busiest airport in the world, and different pilots from different background, linguistic background, they need to easily communicate with the airport staff. So that's why these are the aims of those two countries. And we know that Uzbekistan's government also put the aims why we need to spread learning a foreign language, and especially English, in Uzbekistan. Right. So I know that while teaching a foreign language or English, or while learning a language, or while acquiring a language, always you will come across with these three terminologies. It's approach, method, and technique. So approach to language teaching deals with the theory of teaching. So theory of teaching we can paraphrase as a approach. A method of a language teaching is a set of procedures, arrangement that spells out precisely how to teach a language. Methods are more specific than approaches, but less specific than technique. So we know that there are different methods worldwide, and even most of you guys, you are implementing the method you think is very effective for your learners. So like there are methods how to increase vocabulary skills, there are methods how to boost the writing skills, there are methods like interactive methods, etc. And technique is a classroom activity that's used in teaching language. So the technique, it's a more practical, so it's student oriented, and also a technique, it's the type of a joyful event that will accelerate the language acquisition. For example, if you want to teach a verb to fly, so you will include a set of events. Even you will jump on a table, and what you do, like you will jump from the table and show how you are flying, etc. So the technique, it's a more activities related, and visual understanding how language is constructed. It's very important, for the young learners. So that's why I strongly encourage you guys, to use more techniques rather than full of theories in your classes. So let's go back to language teaching methodology, the history, what happened, for the last 200 years, how we came across all these methods, and why every decade we are changing or focusing or eliminating different methods. So the pre-20th centuries, we had two approaches. So the focus on using language, so speaking and understanding, so and analyzing language, learning the grammatical rules. So which means that the beginning of the 20th century, people were migrating, going for the business, trading, and so understanding the language and explaining someone some thought was the priority. So that's why people mostly focused on the survival language, just to explain their thoughts and express their ideas. So the classical Greek and medieval Latin periods characterized by emphasis on language use, like the reading and translating those very ancient books, the Bible, etc., or the books that were generated from the Greek school of thought. So the Greek and then Latin as a lingua franca, only languages in higher learning in Europe, which means that the higher learning means it was the way how people were communicating in a church or in a government, for example. So and plus the way of the means of the communication, and also at universities as well. And the higher learning only given in the classical languages all over Europe. So continuing with the pre-20th century language teaching, so educated elite became fluent speakers, readers and writers of the appropriate classical language, which means that only the selected elite and the members of the elite families, they had the easy access to education. And the other citizens, I mean, they were type of the not enjoying all these opportunities to gain a proper language skills. Teachers used informal and direct approaches to convey form and meaning of the language. They used oral techniques with the no language books. So continuing with the language teaching approaches, the invention of printing pre and Latin material. So in the 17th century, the well-known Comenius, I mean, he's we called him as the father of the modern education. Comenius published his book. The focus of language, it was shift to analysis, right? So yes, so language teaching approaches that was recommended, or actually it was generated by the Comenius, the well-known the priest and also a very well-known educator, and he proposed inductive approach, and we call it Comenius techniques as well. So the goal was to teach language use rather than language analysis. So that's what we call more like a communication approach. So the ability to read and translate, yeah, it's very important, but to use the language, that's what we call communicative approach. Sometimes we believe that the communicative approach, it's just a type of the invention of the modern life, but it's wrong. So if you can see, the Comenius started communication approach. Use imitation instead of rules to teach a language. For example, okay, let's say a table, let's say an apple. So repeat after me. So looking and imitating and producing, articulating words, it was a main, the main content or main tool of Comenius technique. Have your students repeat after you. So that's what I mentioned in my previous dialogue. Use a limited vocabulary initially, which is very important. So you need to understand whether your learners, so that's what we say, it's like the CFR system. So A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So it's not only the modern life invention. The Comenius has actually proposed. So after analyzing the language aptitude of your student, you need to understand what's the medium limited series of words you need to teach. It's A1 or A2. So based on that B1, B2, you will use a limited vocabulary at the very beginning, and then partially or gradually you will increase giving and allowing them to expose into more wider foreign language vocabulary. Help your students practice reading and speaking. So these are the practical skills. And teach language through pictures to make it meaningful. So you see, I mean, now worldwide, it's type of the highly recommended to use the visual aids. And even for the young learners or for the late adult learners who are just exposed to a foreign language. So actually Comenius proposed that you need to use initially a limited vocabulary, and plus you need to use pictures for them to understand what they are articulating, so to keep in their memory. So all these visual aids, it was actually proposed by Comenius. So continuing after 17th century, now we are in the 19th century. So the analytical grammar translation approach is a method of teaching all modern languages. So now you can see that there is a shift between the practical skills, or we call it inductive approach, or we can say in other words like a practice reading and speaking. But now there is a shift to analytical grammar translation. So which means that people were more focused how to translate the book and how to convey the meaning to today's speakers. Probably it was the time when scientific translation of the foreign books were required by different universities, or even missionaries spreading introducing the Bible. So by end of 19th century, so now we have a direct method, ability to use rather than ability to analyze a language. Now you can see there is a slight shift from analytical translation, grammar translation, towards ability to use the language. And that's the main phenomena right now we are facing with our students in Uzbekistan, or even the teachers' lack of proper methods or proper techniques. Sometimes they are mostly focusing on analytical grammar translation rather than ability to use the language. That's the main problem why most of our young generation cannot communicate. They have very good competence of a language acquisition, so they can easily explain you the definition of different tenses. So if you ask what's the present progressive tense, etc., or any questions related with the fragments of a textbooks, but while you will introduce them or invite them for spontaneous speech and generating different type of questions, then they will be stuck. And because the less practical usage of a language, always limiting their skills to use the language. Good. If you ask me question, so Professor, we have different type of methods starting from 1920s and up to now. So I can type of the highlight those 9 approaches that I think could be useful, but again based on the age, based on the interest, based on the needs analysis, and based on the background and classroom environment, you may select any of those 9 approaches. So we have a grammar translation approach, direct approach, reading approach, audiolingualism, situational approach, cognitive approach, affective humanistic approach, comprehension-based approach, and communicative approach. So right now it's a widely phenomena we are facing with the word like learner autonomy. So, or self-study, autonomous learner. So these are the phrases and the words frequently you are reading or facing or listening in your daily life. This is one of the phenomena highly recommending the universities to arrange an environment for autonomous learning, which is very important. So let's see the definition of the learner autonomy. In 1981, it was coined, or it was generated by Henry Hollick. Learner autonomy is when the learner is willing and capable of taking charge of his or her own learning. The learner should be capable of determining the objectives, defining the content and the progression, selecting methods and techniques to be used, monitoring the procedure of acquisition, evaluating what has been acquired. So that's very important. So autonomous learning happens once leaves the classroom, and without any command and without any control, trying to understand or to continue what he started to acquire in the classroom, which is very important. So this is the main problem, I think, in most of our high schools and universities, because we think that actually our students becoming more teacher dependent rather than teacher independent, which means that they cannot notice their mistakes. We call it noticing hypothesis. So always they need to have some reinforcement, some encouragement, or some support. And always they are reliable, and they cannot actually think that whether I can continue my acquisition once I leave the classroom or the library. So which means that education actually continues after university hours, and it should be the main fragment of the curriculum. So that's why most of universities right now, they're allocating the time for the learners. So we call them self-study or autonomous learning. But the problem is the way of how we're understanding and how we're applying this autonomous learning. Sometimes it's misused or wrongly implemented by some of universities. Still, they didn't understand the concept of the learner autonomy. Anyway, autonomy is not a method of a language learning, it's a capacity. So it's a self-study, negotiated courses, distance learning, independent learning, and autonomous learning. And how do people understand one another when they do not share a common cultural experience? So these are the two questions actually we should ask, because we are now living in a globalized world. What kind of communication is needed by a pluralistic society to be both culturally diverse and unified in common goals? Even in Uzbekistan, we have different ethnic groups, different minorities, and we have different languages spread all over Uzbekistan in north, south, west, east. How does communication contribute to creating a climate of respect, not just tolerance for diversity? These are the questions actually generated by the scholars who are spreading the idea of globalization and intercultural education. And dealing with the difference, and historically, if we were unsuccessful in avoiding different people, we tried to convert them. Political, economic, and religious missionaries sought out opportunities to impose their own beliefs on others. So which means that throughout the history, a lot of missionaries, they tried to convert people by implementing ideas and beliefs of their own religion, doctrines. So that's what we say dealing with the difference. Okay. So one of those methods I mentioned in the previous slides, comprehension-based approaches, or CBA, we call in another way, or comprehension-based learning, CBL. So, total physical response. It was generated or coined by Professor Escher. Delayed oral response. So, these are the now approaches, like the natural approach or diglot weave input or code switching. These are the approach that I'm going to elaborate in the coming next slides. So, total physical response. So, Professor Escher says, the door of understanding is first opened as children respond meaningfully to a particular type of input. So we have an input and we have an output. Namely, directive in context-clear situation that invite an action response rather than a verbal response. For example, total physical response, as it's shown in the slide on your screen, it says that children respond meaningfully to context-clear situation. So action required here, not verbal response. For example, if I will say, sit down, yes, sit down, stand up, stand up, sit down, stand up. So if I will say right now anything in Chinese or Korean, Japanese, children cannot understand, or even the adult learners cannot understand. So the total physical response, it's the way of checking or double checking whether there is an input and the physical response required. Let's jump, jump. Let's smile. Raise your hands. So these are the actions required while I am commanding, ordering, and instructing someone. So usually, early social interaction is through physical response to invitations for movement, such as throw the ball, sit down on the chair, wipe the chalkboard. Mechanism is short and simple. Directive, command. So usually total physical response is used for the young learners and for the late adults who are just learning a language, a foreign language. So that's why it should be a very short. You cannot use a very long sentence because you are not actually expecting that they will verbally articulate something, but rather they should act upon your command. Sit down, stand up, let's jump, let's run, etc. The hearing and the interpretation of the directive. So hearing, like sit down, so a child will analyze, or your students will analyze. Doesn't matter in Korean, Turkish, Japanese. So that's why we have those cells in our brain that keeps every single linguistic property, so which embraces articles, gerunds, verbs, colors, movements, etc. So hearing and interpretation of the directive, the overt action, and then immediately the visible confirmation or disconfirmation of comprehension. So imagine if you will say stand up, but still your students are taking their seats, which means that they couldn't understand the language actually, even though, because that's the way how our brain is constructed. So we have the eardrums. So once I articulate something, and with the bubbles, it travels the air and enters the eardrums, and then through the cochlea, it goes to brain, and the brain is searching through the cells, millions of cells in our brain, whether the sit down or stand up actually exists within the cells. Once it will find that, yeah, there is a word in the cell, then the brain gives the command. Then we will stand up or sit down, etc., based on the what type of action or command was given to us. So that's the case why usually if something happens, so that's what we say, imagine, we call it aphasia. So usually in their childhood, the hyperactive kids, they like, they're very energetic. They like, to climb the tree. And once they climb the tree, they can fall down, hit the head, and the small trauma could occur in the brain. And gradually it will prevent, so it can prevent either they will have a problem with reading skills or writing skills or communication skills, etc. So that's why usually neurolinguists should treat the kids, those who are having such a problem. Okay, so now we can see the total physical response. Let's see how it works in reality. So now we have a total physical response as a progressive problem-solving game. So now identify the box. So you will invite your student and he will come on a stage and you will say, touch the box in which there is a woman standing behind a table. And then he or she should come and touch the box. Which one? So behind the table? Yes. So this one, right? So touch the box. Yes, behind the table. Or they can come and touch something different, here or here, which means that actually they didn't understand, and that's why they cannot respond to your command, which means that the language acquisition type of the faces a problem. So not sufficient exposure to a language, or not getting concrete, comprehensible language content. Okay, another case in which box there are 3 men, 1 tall and 2 short. Right? So again, 3 men, 1 tall and 2 short. So first they will think, analyze, and here you are not expecting that they should verbally respond to you. Yes, teacher, I know what you said. Let me think. Yeah, it's here or whatever. No. You are expecting a child or late adult learner to come and physically respond, to touch any table, any box. Yeah, so this box, yeah, it's correct. Yeah, it's correct. So that's what we say. So you may actually use different type of a game to understand whether the language acquisition, the initial stage, happens without any problems. Otherwise, you will think that they are learning. We call it silent period. In a silent period, they are passively learning environment and looking forward when they will have this self-confidence, and then they're boosting, they try to communicate. Till then, you need to have a very good patience. So it doesn't mean that in a silent period they can understand, but still they're passively learning, but still they cannot articulate or communicate through internal or external factors. So even you can give a different type of a game. For example, draw the picture. So you may give instruction to draw a very simple picture. For example, quickly draw a small house with a chimney. There's a smoke coming out of chimney. Draw the smoke in front of the house. It's a tree. Quickly draw the tree. Now draw a boy and a girl looking through the window from inside the house and thinking it's too wet and too cold to play. So show that it's raining, right? So what you will do, now look at the picture on the next slide. So now I will show you the slide, and then so once you will show the slide, the picture, then your students, they will see the elements of the picture and read again the definition, whether and whether they were doing everything that was instructed by the text. So that's also the way to understand how people are trying to acquire the language, whether your method is appropriate, whether your method is comprehensible, and very easy for them to understand the language. So, and you know, sometimes due to cultural background, we call it mental concept of image. Due to the cultural background, sometimes we can have a different understanding about the world. Let's talk about the dark. So imagine in your classroom, you have different ethnic groups. So a student from Germany and from Turkey, or let's say from Uzbekistan, from Mexico, for example. So if you ask them, okay guys, let's draw a small dog. So they will write a dog, so they will spend like a 5 minutes drawing a dog. And then each of them will come on a stage and show the A3 paper and show what they drew actually. And then you will understand that the mental concept of the image is different. So in Mexico, by saying dog, they will understand the smallest dog in the world, Chihuahua, a very small. In Turkey, they will understand by saying a dog, it's a very large dog. They call it Kangal. In Germany, they call it German Shepherd or Ovcharka. And in Uzbekistan, it can be Alabay or Burubosar, for example, right? Like in Turkmenistan, it's Alabay. So now we can understand that based on the cultural background, even in Uzbekistan, I mean, even for the dishes, like for the plate, in Samarkand we say tabak, but in Tashkent we say lagan, for example. So which means that the prototype of a plate, of a bowl, of a cup, of sweets, completely could be even different in Uzbekistan. Why? Because we are enjoying diversity all over Uzbekistan, but all this, so it's actually diversity. It enriches our culture and history as well. So let's go back to our topic. So let's see what I was actually expecting from my students to show as a proof of evidence, whether they understood my command or my directives. Yeah, so this is actually implication, and this is the reflection of the text from the previous slide. So this is the text interpretation, and here we have actually a real picture. But believe me, most of the students or young learners, they will have a different view, because you know, in different cultures, the house could be shaped differently, or chimney, or in some countries there is no rain even, or snow, for example. So So which means that you will even understand the inner soul, how the inner soul reflecting to a language, we call it sociology or social linguistics, how language affects a society, or vice versa, how society affects a language. Okay, we call it diglot weave input or code switching. So right now, most of our kids, they're bilingual, even trilingual, or polyglot. So most of our citizens, they're traveling around the globe, living for a while there. For example, myself and my family members, we spent almost 20 years. So which means that sometimes the kids are exposed to another languages. Even here in Uzbekistan, for example, in Tashkent, like in school, they communicate in Russian, for example, if it's a Russian-speaking classroom. So with their neighbors, they will communicate in Uzbek. But in Samarkand or Bukhara, for example, we have a widely spread Tajik language, for example. So you may communicate Tajik with your neighbors or in a bazaar, for example. Let's say if you're moving to north, you may communicate with your neighbors Kazakh language, for example, or Kyrgyz if it's extreme east, for example. So which means that the kids are exposed to different languages, and sometimes we call it code switching. So once they come and within the sentence there are like 10 words, 3 is Russian, like 3 is Uzbek, 2 is a Kazakh, and 1 is a Tajik, for example. So that's why the code switching is a wide phenomena right now. Even in a daily life or in a daily conversation, even adult, like we are living in the, as a part of society, we are frequently code switching different words, and it was a part of our legacy. So Uzbekistan, it's like cradle of different civilizations. Right, so let's see what changed actually for the 21st century. And if you remember the slides, so we started from the 16th century. Teaching English as a foreign, a second language in the 21st century changed an education. So let's see. So this is the prototype of the car 2 centuries back. So which means that in 19th century, if you ask a foreign language learner, let's draw the picture of the car, that's what you could have at that time. So, but now in the 21st century, now you can see that the design, engine, the shape of the car completely changed, and you cannot even compare with this picture. Okay, so this is a 19th century telephone. Yes, I think still most of your grandparents or even your parents still, they're very accustomed to use such a traditional phones because it reminds a history, and it also stands for aristocracy, and maybe very easy to use. So a lot of functions, so 2 your hands are very busy, I mean, with the telephone. So, but now, if you say in the 21st century, what do you expect now? Yes, you're right. So you're expecting smartphones, right? Even most of our students in a high school, they use a very sophisticated phones. And even the babies, I mean like 1 year old or 2 years old, they are so technically, they're technically type of designed, and multifunctionally use the phone not only watching the YouTube cartoons and the videos, but also doing a lot of other functions of the phone. Right, so 19th century plane. Yes, the brother Wright, right? The first plane that was invented, and people were enjoying a lot the first plane. But now we have, of course, we have a different type of a plane, which means that now you can see that the technology changes and changes, right? So yes, what about 19th century classroom? Tell me, or think for a while, what type of picture you are expecting for the next slide? This is very, very important, right? So like technology maybe, a very furnished classroom, why not? Or smart classroom, iPads, smart board maybe. Yes, so I will leave you for a while, for a couple of seconds. Think about that, please. Yes, I came back. I said, I will be back. So, what type of picture you are trying to visualize in your mind as a prototype of a 21st century classroom? Let's see. Yes, nothing different. Still, those kids raising hands, shouting, screaming, and here as well, the same stuff, which means actually education didn't change much. Why? Look, it was extracted from Time magazine, so December 18, 2006. And it's a text. Rip Van Winkle awakens in the 21st century after 100 years snooze and is of course utterly bewildered by what he sees. Men and women dash about, talking to small metal devices pinned to their ears. Young people sit at home on sofas, moving miniature athletes around the electronic screens. Older folk defy death and disability with metronomes in their chest and with the hips made of metal and plastic. Airports, hospitals, shopping malls, every place Rip goes just baffles him. But when he finally walks into a schoolroom, the old man knows exactly where he is. This is a school, he declares. We used to have these back in 1910s. Only now the blackboards are green. So, nothing changed actually in education except blackboards. So, which means that the famous German philosopher Alexander von Humboldt, he says, a language cannot be taught. One can only create conditions for learning to take place. You see, it's very important. So, which means that we need to create a condition, motivation, environment for the language learners to learn a language. For example, in Finland, in elementary school, while they're learning a foreign language, all classrooms without any furniture. So the kids are just running towards classroom and interacting, jumping, flying, etc. So they are learning a language through actions. So that's very important. Unfortunately, most of our foreign language teachers, they think that they should control and expose a lot of books, and they think they are the source of language acquisition, which is wrong. So if you create an environment, they will learn a language. So the characteristics of affected 21st century teachers. So language didn't change. And even the characteristics of the teacher didn't change. And the challenge of a care in schools. So a professional teacher or instructor should have or should possess and should be caring about the students, friendliness. Unfortunately, most of our professors or teachers, they assume they possess full of knowledge. That's why they should be distant, and that's why they're keeping away themselves from the students. Respect for all students, regardless of a gender, social status, ethnicity, linguistic competence, professional attitude, etc. So these are the factors. Always you should respect your students, regardless whether they are mastering the language, they are highly exposed to a language, they are producing a very good command in a foreign language. Still, you should respect all your students. Actively listening, this is very important, because mostly when students coming to the tutors, teachers, professors, deans, whatever, rectors, vice rectors, school principals, master teachers, etc., always there is a barrier. The one who is a teacher speaks a lot. The one who is a student always listen, and he or she is forbidden to talk anything, and no one is listening. Once they will start to say about their problem, immediately they are stopping them, saying no. Understanding the world from students' point of view. That's the, I think, main dilemma we are facing right now in our education system. Desire and openness to learning from students. We call it peer-to-peer teaching. You should learn something from the students as well, because they are very exposed to technical devices, learning too many things from the smartphones, iPads, laptops. Flexibility, which means sometimes you should change your rule. So you should be you should produce a very agile system, how to communicate and how to change your rule. Sense of humor. Imagine that early morning you enter the classroom and you are very sad or very angry, and with the very monotone dialogue you are talking about some stuff. So sometimes sense of humor, it's like warming up, ice breaking, and it's for a good relationship. And it's also type of a confidence that actually brings together professor and teacher. Sense of humor. No need to behave as if, you know, you are like you are like mourning someone, or you are like in a funeral. Tolerance of ambiguity. Yes, you should be very tolerant to different type of students, different clothes, different style of communication, different arts, etc. So these are the, I think, characteristics that actually makes 21st century professional, successful teacher. I really appreciate your time spending with me today, and I hope that in the very soonest time, once this video will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, you can easily leave your comment You can write any type of questions, and hopefully we will find a channel through which we can communicate, and I'm very willing to have the feedbacks, hopefully from your side, and I really appreciate time spending today with me. See you soon and take care.